In this quick video, I'll be giving you an overview of the Resource Plan module within OnePlan. So to get access to my Resource Plan through the Plans module, I'm going to go down to my plan, click on my hamburger here, and I'm going to click on Resource Plan. Now, one of the nice things about the Resource Plan module within OnePlan is you don't need to have a detailed schedule or plan in order to commit or request resources for your plan. So here I am in my OnePlan work plan, and you'll see here I have my work plan and my resource plan. So I'm in my resource plan, and over here on the left, out of the box, we've created three different what we call resource types. You have your committed, which is your request or your capacity plan. You have your scheduled, so this is if you have a work plan, or if you've used Microsoft Project or Project for the Web, you can see what resources are assigned to what tasks. And then you have your timesheets or actuals in here. But I'm going to start here in the committed area, because this is where the scenario is. This plan has not yet been planned out. I just have an idea, and I'm wanting to get an idea of what type of resources we need to have on here. Do we have the right resources? So the first thing I want to do is, for this particular OnePlan work plan, is to add a few resources. So within OnePlan, you can add individual resources. So if I wanted to say, let's go ahead and add Peter, I can then just start typing a name and say add, and I can say I need Peter from June to, let's say, the end of the year. So we'll go ahead and say OK. And I'm going to need Peter 50% allocation through that time. I can either enter in hours per month, or I can enter in the total hours all together, and it will prorate it across June through December. I'm going to go ahead and add that. And over here, you're going to see that by adding Peter, we have quite a bit of over allocation from July through November. And so what we can do is we can actually open up a candidates list here, and we can come here, select Peter, and say we want to find the best match. So what this is going to do is going to go out and look for anybody that has the support role and that's part of this department, which you can configure. It could be additional things like location and so forth. But it's going to come back and tell me, currently Peter is a negative 75% available during this time frame for this particular work. But Jared here has 33%, not 100% availability, but 33. So what we might want to do is say, okay, well, let's, instead of use Peter, we're going to go ahead and use Jared. So I'm going to go ahead and replace. And so now you'll see we have Jared assigned to this task. Now, obviously, there's still some over allocation here, but we're doing a lot better than we were with Peter. If I wanted to see what other plans Jared was planned to work on during that time, I can actually expand down here below, and I can get some more additional information on what plans Jared has been planned against. I could set up meetings with these different managers to maybe negotiate Jared, and so forth. So this is a way I can kind of come in, find the right resources with the right availability, the right skill set. Now, I might also just want to assign a generic role. So I might want to come in here and say, I also need a developer. So I got my support person there, but I also need a developer from June to December, the end of the year as well. And this particular developer, I'm going to need 100% of the time. So I'm going to go ahead and say add 100% of the time. And so now what you'll see is we've now added in a generic. And what this will do, when negotiations are turned on, it will send an email to the resource manager that owns this generic in this department and notify them that I am requesting a resource for this generic. And so that will allow them to find the right resources in the global resource pool, which I'll show you in a second, and add them to replace them from there to get the right resources with the right availability. Now, if I go across the top here, right now I'm looking at hours for this particular resource plan. So you can see 176 hours for a developer. I can switch it to percentage. So we talked about 50% for a support person and 100% for a developer. I can also change this to FTE. So if I wanted to actually say, instead of just one FTE, I need actually 2 FTEs during this time frame. So when this request goes out to a resource manager, they'll know that they need to fulfill this request with 2 developers at a minimum to fulfill this request. So you can do, again, FTEs, percentages, or hours. I also might not want to do this by months. Maybe I'm doing this more of a quarterly plan or a yearly plan. So I can actually switch my calendar here to say, let's say quarters. We also support weekly as well, if that's turned on. So you can actually see weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. So now you'll see here I'm looking at a quarterly a grid time phase view here, and so so you can adjust those periods there as well. You can also filter out resources if you have a lot of resources in here and you just wanted to see everybody that's on here as a developer or they're from a certain business role. You can easily filter out resources. And currently we're looking at capacity as what we're compared to in the heat map. Now, one of the nice things about OnePlan as well is if you've already built a resource or a work plan, so you have some detailed plans either through OnePlan or if you use Microsoft Project Desktop, Project for the Web, or Planner, you can actually import that in, and that can build your resource plan from your work plan. So if you've already got all the details, you know what resources you need to have on a particular task, instead of having to rekey all that in, I can just come in here and say import, and this will import and pre-populate my resource plan. Now once it's in here, you can make some adjustments to it. For example, I'll change this to percent and say instead of making it 18.6 or 18%, I can do, let's just round them up, so 15, and this one's going to be 11%, and this will be 88%, and this will be 41%. So we can kind of change some of the allocations here from the work plan to get maybe a little buffer from the resource manager to approve these hours. Now, one of the things you can do as you start to build in this commitment is you can compare that to what's actually in your schedule. So here is an example where I now, instead of looking at capacity, I wanted to compare it to my scheduled work. And so here we can kind of drill in and look across here and see how we're doing against the scheduled work. So you'll see we had changed our commitment to 20%, where scheduled is 18.46%, and 15% for committed here. So you'll see you can compare what's committed versus where it's scheduled. And where this is important is when a resource manager approves that you can use Jared 20% of the time in quarter 2 and 15% in quarter 3, if your schedule starts to get misaligned and you start to assign Jared more into your schedule, this will alert the resource manager as well as yourself that you're outside the bounds of the commitment you've made with your resource manager. So this is kind of a nice way to have that negotiation with the resource manager to what's actually in your work plan. Now, it's also nice that you also can compare to actuals. So if you wanted to compare what you originally had committed Jared to or any of these resources to originally and got approval, you can compare it to your timesheets. So you can actually see how much did you actually spend on those items themselves. And so as you'll see here, we haven't added any time yet. This is a new plan, but you would be able to add that in here as well. You also might want to delegate some approvals. This gives you a nice little legend on what the colors all mean, the different variances in the colors here. You can also copy values from different resource types. So if you might want to create maybe an original baseline commitment or a revised commitment. And so if you do that, if you wanted to keep that history saved, you could actually go and copy from your committed that's approved to let's call it a baseline commitment, so you'll have the original version of that as well. And if you wanted to look at reports, you can click on reports here and look at a dashboard view of some of the resources that are in your plan as well. Now coming back here, you do have the ability to switch these views as mentioned earlier to see if you wanted to see the scheduled or resource views. But right now you'll see that negotiations are not on, but if I wanted to actually change this back to, hey, I want this to be proposed, so I'm actually requesting a developer here, I'm actually requesting a project manager here as well, and I'm requesting a support resource here as well. What this does is sends off an email notification to a functional or resource manager, and the resource or functional manager would come into our global resource plan. So by coming into the global resource plan, this allows the functional or resource manager to look at all their resources across the organization, and so they can quickly see a view of their allocations across the different plans here. And so I can quickly open up and see what Adam Barr has been scheduled to work on, what Daniel Williams is planned to work on, maybe Ehrlich here. Ehrlich looks like he's working on lots of different plans here within the system. So this is where, as a resource manager, can get that visibility and to see why people are over allocated, and maybe make some comments and get a discussion going with the project managers or the plan managers on, things that we can make adjustments to here in their resource plans. But in this scenario, there has been some requests for a developer. So as we mentioned down here, the OnePlan work plan that we just built is requesting a developer about 155 hours in June and August. And so as a resource manager, I can select this resource. I can go into my candidates list here, and I can, as I was showing earlier, as in the plan itself, I can go give me the best person available for this particular work. I'm looking for a developer that's in the product development team and that has this availability. And so you'll see that Sophia King comes up here as 100% available with the right skill sets and in the right department. So I'm going to go ahead and say, yes, I want to fulfill that and replace Sophia King on that role. So now I've just committed Sophia King to that OnePlan work plan project as the developer. Again, we also had a request for, I believe it was a project manager. So let's go ahead and go down to my project manager and open project manager up. And I can come down here and see that there is a request for a project manager. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now I can also do other things by just looking at, I want to look at a role and I want to look at a project manager or a developer. I can look at somebody's in a certain department. So I can filter out my candidates list. Or you can just simply select on the best match, and that's going to come back and give you who is the best match with that skill set and that location and that department. So you'll see here now Joe Larscheid here has the best availability, where Gavin is way overbooked, double overbooked. So we probably don't want to put Joe on it. So I'm going to go ahead, grab Joe. I'm going to have my selection here for this particular plan, and I'm going to go ahead and say replace. And so now the functional manager will be notified on this replacement. And so now they'll know that Joe is going to be the project manager on the OnePlan work plan. So this is just a quick overview on the resource plans modules within OnePlan.